Come on. Well, how are we doing tonight, student night? That was just pitiful. That was just pitiful. I'm sorry. We're going to have to run that back. How are we doing tonight, student night? You guys doing good? That was a lot better. That was a lot better. If we've never met, my name is Chandler. I'm the student director here at Action. It is really and truly an honor to be here with you tonight. But before we get into the message, I just got to honor our worship team. They already went back there. Well, can we just give it up for our worship team? Come on, you guys can do better than that. They are absolutely amazing. What you don't see is they get here off work early. All the production team in the back gets here at 4 o'clock, and they rehearse just to lead you guys in worship. And so I'm super thankful wherever you guys are. That was just absolutely amazing. Well, hey, you guys may not know a lot about me. Maybe this is your first time. Maybe you've been here for a while. But I actually got married about a year ago. We celebrated a year in January. Yep, she's awesome. She's on the front row right there. Loves being called out in public. And when you get married, I feel like, hopefully none of you guys are here that are actually students at that place in your life, but when you get married, you obviously live with someone, right? And I feel like when you live with someone, you really kind of figure out what you're not good at. Has anybody been in that situation? Any married people in here? You're like, I think I have realized what I'm not good at. You know, like I'm not good at a lot of things, but the main thing that I realized that I wasn't good at is ordering food for other people. Is anybody just horrible at that? Your mom sends you to Publix with like 17 sub orders and then gets mad because you like forgot mayo on hers. Nope, just me. Okay, this is gonna go great. I'm so happy that I'm just gonna get this off my chest then. So when we first got married, I really started to do well. You know, I was doing okay. I messed up some orders here and there, but it was always at places that were like random. Like it was Chipotle, it was like Panera, you know, things that they have okay customer service, but I still blamed on the restaurant. I was like, hey, I don't know why your crackers aren't in there. It must have been Chipotle, it must have been the worker. I definitely said crackers, like anybody. And so then it started happening at Chick-fil-A, where I would get the order wrong. And at this point, I'm like, Chick-fil-A has the greatest customer service known to mankind, so I officially have to take this one on my own. And I started to realize this. One time I went to Chick-fil-A, I go, and my wife, I think she got like nuggets or something, so I get the bag, I'm like, hey, can a nugget? She's like, hey, you need to get these specific sauces. And I was like, oh, I got this. Get home, no sauces whatsoever. I'm like, listen, that was Chick-fil-A's fault. I'm sorry, I don't know what you want me to do. I go back a couple weeks later, and I'm going and I'm getting some chicken tortilla soup. Come on, does anybody like the chicken tortilla soup? Man, thank you, man. Chick-fil-A's getting no love tonight. But I got the chicken tortilla soup, and my wife's like, hey, you've got to get extra crackers. Extra crackers are of the utmost importance because you put it in the soup, and it gives a little texture, you know. And so I go, and I'm like, okay, I'll get the extra crackers. 0 extra crackers. I'm just like completely bombing it at this point. So by the time that the third time that I go to Chick-fil-A in a couple weeks comes around, I'm like, listen, this is my time. Like, this is my time to shine. I have fallen previously. I have been embarrassed, but no more. I will conquer ordering the correct thing. So she orders the same thing again. I mean, I'm talking chicken tortilla soup, extra crackers, medium Coke Zero, let's just say. I don't know if that's what she got, but we'll play out the situation. So I'm in line, and I'm in the drive-thru. We still didn't open up dining yet. I'm in the drive-thru, and I'm like, this is it. I got it pulled up on my phone. I know exactly what I'm going to order. I get to the window or the person, and I say exactly what I'm reading. And they're like, okay, like, thank you. Like, you got the soup and the crackers. I'm like, okay, just so we can confirm, I go through the whole thing again. Crackers, soup, Coke. Yes, sir. Like, yes, we got it. Okay, awesome. I roll up to the window. I'm like, this is the time. I double-checked. I triple-checked at the window. You know, they put it in, like, the gray bin. And you're like, okay, I'll take it out of this weird bin. I don't even know where you got this bin, but I'll kind of take it out of it. And so I get it out, and I check the bag, right? I'm, like, in the bag, like, okay, I think this is soup. I've never got soup at Chick-fil-A, but this looks like soup. I got the extra crackers. I got the Coke. Man, I am ready to go. This is it for me. I've got the biggest smile in my face. I come walking in the door. I think I was so focused on her order, I forgot to actually order anything for myself. And I was so focused, and I got in there, and I said, listen, this is it. This is the time. And I put it down on the table, and I just walk away like this. I'm the man. I am the man in this situation. And I walk over to the kitchen, and I think I was getting a drink or something, and all I hear is, are you serious? And I was like, there's no way. There is no way in heaven and earth that I messed this up. She opens up the soup, And instead of chicken tortilla soup, she says, babe, this is chicken noodle. I was like, you have got to be kidding me. I think I called Chick-fil-A. I don't know if I've ever called Chick-fil-A. I didn't even know they had a phone number. But I got on the phone and said, listen, this is the wrong soup. It was absolutely ridiculous. And I was thinking about that this week. And I was thinking about that in the way that we go about life. And it made me think about this truth. You can't control what you receive. I have had no control over who in the world is putting the soup in the bag. I had no control over whether I got fries or soup. I had no control over what I was receiving. In life, it's the same way. We have no control over the situations and things that get thrown our way. You don't get to choose which family you're born into. You don't get to choose who your parents are. You don't get to choose if your mom is a great person and your dad supports you. You don't get to choose if you have a boyfriend or not. Look, there's things in your life that you don't get to choose, that you don't have control over. You don't have control over the fact that our world is in a pandemic right now. We don't have control over that, but there's one thing that we do have control over. There's one thing, and that is how we respond to those situations that are thrown our way. You don't have control over the fact that your parents' marriage is on the brink of your divorce, but you have control over how you respond to that situation. You have control over it. And in reality, your response and how you respond to things that are thrown your way in life will ultimately push you closer towards God or pull you farther away. It will ultimately shape your future. It'll shape your future. I thought about this story as I was preparing for this message, and it's Daniel in the lion's den. If you've been around church at all, you may have heard this story kind of talked about. But to give you a little context before we jump into the story, there's this king, his name was Darius, and he was ruling over this land, and he had kind of these guys that were kind of taking charge for him, that he had 120 people that basically were running his kingdom for him. And out of those 120 people, 3 of those were kind of the leaders of the leaders. Right, we're tracking? Everybody with me? Give me a nod, give me a wave, give me something. There we go. Out of those 3 people, there was one whose name was Daniel. And Daniel was different than all the others because Daniel had one unique characteristic. He was in love with God. He loved God. He pursued God. He prayed to God regularly. He was all about Jesus, all about God. And that separated him because there was no corruption in him. And the other people, the other 3, the 120, really hated him for that because that really allowed him to level up in the organization, so to speak. That they started to get jealous and envious, and they started to really think, man, how do we get this guy out of office, essentially? How do we get this guy out of the way? How do we get this guy out of our lives? And they couldn't find anything through his actions. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He wasn't sliding himself money on the side. He wasn't doing anything with women that he shouldn't be doing. And so they decided to use his own religion against him to get him out of this position. That's where we really pick it up. In Daniel 6, verse 6, it says, so the administrators and high officers went to the king and said, long live King Darius. We are all in agreement, we administrators, officials, high officers, advisors, and governors, that the king should make a law that will be strictly enforced. Give orders that in the next 30 days, any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except you, your majesty, will be thrown into the den of lions. And now, your majesty, issue it and sign this law so it cannot be changed. An official law of Medes, Persians that cannot be revoked. So King Darius signed the law. What is that a lot of saying? It's saying that essentially they made it illegal for Daniel to pray. They created an entire law just so that he was not allowed to pray. And it essentially created this issue. And obviously, Daniel had no idea. Daniel didn't have a say in it, regardless of what that verse says, that we all agree that Daniel had no control over that situation. Daniel had no control. Daniel had no say. Even with the high-ranking official that he was, he had literally no say. And can I be honest? If I was him, I'd be pretty ticked. Like, would anybody be upset at that point? Like, what What happened? Like, I'm one of the top guys. Like, I'm not trying to throw my title around, but I'm a big deal around here. And all of a sudden, we're creating rules and laws, and he had every reason to be upset at God. He had every reason to be upset at his king. He had every reason to be upset at everybody else in the entire kingdom that is making this happen. But that's not what he does. He has a situation that is thrown at him that he cannot control. Something thrown at him that literally it would be the result of this situation would be death. Like getting thrown into the lion's den is a little worse than prison. Like, can I get an amen? I would rather go to prison in today's world than be thrown in the den with lions. I don't know a ton about lions, but I don't want to be in a den with anybody else. That's not me. That's not me. He had no control over the situation, but I love his response, and I want to talk about his response the rest of the time that we have together. In verse 10, it says, "But when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down as usual in his upstairs room with its windows open toward Jerusalem." I love this part. "He prayed 3 times a day, just as he has always done, giving thanks to God." How incredible is that? Who would have that response? Nobody. Yet Daniel takes the time and he says, you know what? He doesn't say anything. But his actions show us that in his mind, he says, you know what? Regardless of what I can control, I am going to do what I've always done and trust who I have always trusted, regardless of the situations going on around me. And I'm going to still get on my knees, regardless of the situation, and put God first. He responds so well in a way that is pushing him closer to God. I think you and I can learn from Daniel tonight. I think you and I can learn how to respond, because the reality is, I don't know if you've noticed, but we live in a fallen world. Like, there are things going on around us that we can't control, and horrible things that happen to us that we didn't ask for or prepare for. So how do we do this? How do we control our response in a world that you can't control? Through thick, through thin, through good times and bad. How do we control our response to allow us to grow closer to God, not fall farther away? I got 3 things, and the first one is pray consistently. Pray consistently. Let's throw verse 10 back up on the screen. It says, "But when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down as usual in his upstairs room with his windows open toward Jerusalem." I want you to catch this next part. "He prayed 3 times a day, as he has always done before, giving thanks to his God." What I love about Daniel's response that I think that you and I can learn from is that his first reaction was prayer. It was almost second nature to him. That, man, I have this situation. I don't know what to do with it. I should pray. I have this situation with my parents. I should pray. I have this situation with this girl bullying me at school because of the way I should look. What if we said I should pray? I should pray. A lot of you guys in here tonight maybe think that prayer is this big holy moment where you got to cross your body and kind of have some special jewelry, or maybe even go through somebody to pray. You have to know all the right lingo. Like, there's this Christian language that you have to know in order to talk to God, and I can't tell you how false that actually is. Prayer is simply this: communicating with God. Communicating with God. You can talk exactly how you talk and talk to God. You don't have to use thou and holy words and all this stuff. No. It's just talking to God. It's just talking to God. But man, what happens when you're like, oh, I just don't feel him? I hear this all the time. Oh, I've had a rough situation. I just don't feel God anymore. I've been praying, but I just don't feel him. I actually have 2 dogs, if you didn't know, a little bit more about me. I have 2 dogs. I don't have any kids, so I'm just going to tell stories about my dogs this whole time, if that's cool. But a couple months ago, kind of during the quarantine time, my dog just wouldn't eat. And it was the most frustrating thing in the world, because I'm just sitting up there like, you're an animal. Like, I have food for you. I'm like throwing hamburgers in there. I'm like, it's Greek yogurt. I like gummy bears. Like, what are you going to eat in this bowl? Because I will go spend my life savings to get you to eat this food. Like, that's where I was at in this process. And I said, you know what? I have had enough of you not eating. I'm taking you to the vet. I promise this is going somewhere. I'm not just ranting about my dog's issues. I promise. So I take her to the vet. And the doctor says, or the vet, whatever they are, He says, veterinarian? Yeah. They're still doctors, though, right? They're doctors. The doctor says, well, you have to kind of start doing this thing where you put the bowl down and like time it and then take it away. And then you put it down again, you take it away. You put it down again every day. You set the timer for 5 minutes. If she doesn't eat, you take it away. And I was like, well, sir, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. I've already tried this. Like, I have watched a ton of dog vloggers on YouTube. This is old news, my friend. And he asked me this question that I want to ask you tonight. He said, well, did you do it consistently? And I did not do it consistently. I was like, if it didn't work within the 2 times, I was like, we're on to the next thing. Let's throw some gummy bears in there, see if it works. But that's what I want to ask you. When it comes to prayer, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm in a tough situation. I prayed a little bit, and I prayed and it didn't work. Well, did you do it consistently? When it comes to a relationship with God in your life, so many of us are like, well, I just don't feel him. And I want to ask you, do you pray consistently? God is not some vending machine that when you're in the back of a cop car and you need some help, or when you didn't study for a test, that you could be like, oh my gosh, God, I need your help. Obviously, he's there for that, but it's not just for that. It is for consistent, every single day communication with God. Some people truly believe that prayer is only for when you're in a tough situation. It's not. I love this verse in 1 Thessalonians. It just says this: never stop praying. It doesn't say never stop praying until your life gets good. It doesn't say never stop praying until your parents' marriage is fixed. It doesn't say never stop praying until you get into that college. It doesn't say never stop praying until you get a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It simply says never stop praying. Prayer is not a one and done thing. It's not a spiritual vending machine where you get to punch in some numbers and get exactly what you want. Prayer is a daily communication with the God who created you and loves you more than anything that you could ever imagine, that knows every single part of you and still loves you. That's what prayer is. Some people are exhausted in here praying for a situation when you've only prayed for it one time. Like, he could do it that one time, but what if he wants to test your faith? And see, will they keep coming back, or will they try something else if it doesn't work out? Trying to build a relationship and a faith in Jesus without praying is like trying to charge your iPhone with no cord. You ever tried to charge your iPhone with no cord? You don't get very far. It doesn't charge. Then why would we think that we can build a relationship with God that sustains every situation, whether we can control it or not, based off not praying? We have got to pray consistently. Secondly, we have to serve passionately. We have to serve passionately. Some of you guys are like, I don't even know what that means. Serve what? Serve who? Let me break it down to you really simple. Serving, in simplicity, is really about making Jesus' name more famous than yours and mine. It's as simple as that. It's making Jesus' name more famous than mine. At Action Church, we believe in serving. We believe that God has given each person in this room abilities, gifts, desires, things that you can do to make Jesus' name famous. We have hundreds of people that show up every single week that hold doors. There were people on your way in today that were holding a door, that were talking to you, saying, hey, what's up? How are you? It's called serving. They're using their gifts, not selfishly, not for their own glory, but to bring God glory. That's what serving is. I love in verse 10. Let's show it back up on the screen. This verse may look familiar because it's the same exact one. Verse 10, it says, but when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down as usual in his upstairs room. That's what I want to highlight. He knelt down. Because when you kneel down to something, it is an action or a reflection of servanthood. Have you ever looked or seen a movie where a king walks into the room and all the knights and all the people in the room take a knee? It's a symbol of servanthood. And I love how Daniel so beautifully, when he hears this news, I can't control, I may die tomorrow, but what does he do? He still kneels down. He still exemplifies this attitude of, man, you know what? Regardless of what's happening in my life, I'm still going to serve God. Regardless of what's happening in my world, regardless of what's happening in our world, I'm still going to serve God. And I love how it says, as usual. It says, as he knelt down as usual. It shows that when Daniel's life was on the mountaintop, when he was one of the rulers of the kingdom, he knelt down and served God. And now that his life is about to end up in a pit with some lions that could potentially rip his head off, he still kneels down. What if we did that? What if we served like that? A couple years ago, I was in a ministry school in Bradenton, Florida, and we did some crazy stuff. And one of the trips that we got to go on is we got to be able to go to Houston, Texas, and be involved in some prison ministry, which was awesome. We kind of set up these stages and did basically what we're doing here, but to inmates that were actually in prison for sentences for just a variety of things. And somehow I ended up in the women's prison. I don't really know how that happened. I don't know what about me said that, man, you could really connect with some women convicts. I don't know if it was the necklace or, I don't have any, I don't know what it was. But somehow I end up basically in this women's prison with 5 or 6 other of my friends from the college. And I remember setting up this stage, and it was amazing. God was doing some amazing things. And I remember that towards the end of the service, the chaplain or pastor or whatever you want to call him, who was really leading the service, said, hey, Chandler, well, he asked me what my name was. He didn't know what my name was. We did literally just met. But he said, hey, I'd love for you to share something at the end of the service. And I was like, well, okay. I guess I'll get up in front of 500 women prisoners and say something to encourage them. I'm kind of just running through the situation in my head. And I basically get up on the stage. And as soon as I get up on this platform, this stage, I see all of the guards and all of the people that are running this event besides one guy walk out of the room. And here I am. It's probably a room, not this big, but probably just as many seats of just all female prisoners. And I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? So I just went through my thought, and I was like, you know what? They'll come back. They'll come back and rescue me. Someone will close down the service so beautifully, ask everyone to go back to their cells or their rooms, and that did not happen. I get to the end of this thought, and nobody is back in the room. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. So I just start rambling. I just make up another thought, and apparently there was a situation going on outside. I made up another thought, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm done. So I literally just said, so, anybody know what's next? Or, okay. Kind of walked around for a few more seconds, and this is what was horrible. You guys are going to judge me so much for this. I can't even believe I'm sharing this. Then I go, well, I get so desperate. I go, so nice weather we're having today, right? To a room full of convicts and prisoners who haven't gone outside. Oh my gosh, it was absolutely humiliating. But I think that when it comes to serving God, how many times do we end up like the guards and people that were running the event? That something happens in our life, whether bad or even good things, and suddenly we're gone. How many times have you been serving as students with friends in a kid's environment or at City Group or inviting your friends to student night, and you're all coming for so many months, and then all of a sudden you look up and you go, where did everybody go? Where did everybody go? I think so often when things that we can't control just creep into our lives, that we drop the very calling that God has for us. We drop the very thing that God has presented in front of us, some area where He wants to serve. What if we were people that said, man, regardless of what is happening in our lives, regardless of if I'm having an awesome time in life or a horrible time in life, that I am going to choose to serve God. I'm going to choose to make Jesus famous. What if we were that people? Thank you, Pastor Andrew. Man. What if we were those people that said, man, regardless of what happens in my life, I'm going to serve God? And you may ask me, why serve God? Why should I come and invite people to student night? Why should I go to a city group and invite my friends? Why should I on the weekend hold a door open for somebody? I don't even know them. I'm not nearly even making a difference, but what you don't realize that there are thousands and thousands of people in our community, in your friend groups, in your schools, in your families that need the love of Jesus Christ. Why? That's why that we need to spread the gospel. We need to serve. Pastor Chris Hodges says this: the best way to get through your pain is to help someone else through theirs. So profound. The best way for you to get through your pain is to help someone through theirs. I think that a lot of times when you hear a message like this, that you hear, man, this is to someone whose life is going horrible. That this is for somebody whose life is in the toilet. This is for somebody whose life is going terrible, horrible. I'm good, and my life is going great. Have you ever noticed that sometimes when life is going great, that it's the time that you feel the least connected to God? Have you ever noticed that when life is going great, when you got plenty of money in the bank account, when you got friends that love you, when you have a relationship that's thriving, when your parents are doing good, when your grades are doing good, when you're starting on your sports team, have you ever noticed that sometimes you tend to, kind of step back from what God is calling you to do? And the reason why is because we get to a place where we see, I don't need God anymore. I needed God when my life was a mess, but now that my life is good, I don't necessarily need him anymore. And what do we end up in? We use the excuse of being happy to walk away from God's purpose for our lives. We use happiness as an excuse not to serve. Can I tell you that happiness and fulfillment are two very different things? Happiness and fulfillment are two very different things. I found this quote by Tom Brady, not from this past week, but from years ago after he won this Super Bowl, his third Super Bowl in 2007. He said this to a reporter. He said, "Why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still think there's something greater out there for me?" He's the greatest football player to ever live, to ever walk the planet, and he has won 3 Super Bowls and said, this isn't it for me. There's something greater for me. And why is he saying that? He's saying that because he's feeling the hole in his spirit and the hole that we have in ours that can only be filled by the serving of Jesus, by the fulfillment of Jesus, and us walking in our plan and our purpose to fulfill his calling for our lives. I believe some of you tonight, your life is going great, but you're the farthest from God you've ever been. And I believe that God is saying, come home. Come back to me. That we may be too afraid to come back to him, but he's saying, come back to me. We've got to serve. We've got to serve God. Lastly, close it down with this. We've got to trust firmly. Trust firmly. Let's read the scripture one more time. It says, but when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down as usual in his upstairs room. With his windows open toward Jerusalem, he prayed 3 times, just as he has always done. I love this last little part. Giving thanks to his God. His response amazes me. And the reason why I spent so much on this time is because he never actually said anything until the very end of the story. So he went through the whole story without saying one word. That's not like me. I was the kid that got in trouble, not for what I actually did, but for how much I responded. Anybody like me? Your parents ground you, and they're like, all right, 1 week, and I'm like, they're like 2 weeks. I'm like, that's it? Anybody? Nope, just me. I'm just a sinner. I'm preaching to myself. I was that person, but it's crazy. Daniel doesn't say anything. He doesn't yell at the king. He doesn't yell at God. He doesn't yell at his friends. He doesn't yell at the people that tricked him into this situation. My prayer would be, God, get me out of this situation. But what does he do? He doesn't just pray and ask God for help. He thanks God. He thanks God. Even though he knows he's probably going to be thrown in the lion's den. What is he doing? He is showing trust. Because the truth is how the story goes is that Daniel actually gets caught praying and gets thrown into the lion's den, and they put this stone over his hole or den that he's in, and the king is kind of a mess because he really liked Daniel, and they go through a night, and the king runs back down to see if Daniel's okay in the morning, to see what happened, and at that moment is when he says something. The whole story doesn't say a single word, and at the end he says something. I'm going to read it to you in verse 21. This is his first words in the story. It says, Daniel answered, "Long live the king. My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths so they would not hurt me. For I have been found innocent in his sight, and I have not wronged you, your majesty." And I read this, and I'm like, how can we in this room not believe that God is trustworthy? How can we not believe that a God that loves us so much is trustworthy? I'm just getting fired up while I'm reading it. I'm like, I just don't understand. I just don't understand, God. How can people read this and not know how much you love them, and how can they not trust you? And God showed me this verse. Can we put it back up on the screen? That verse 21. It's this part right here that God showed me. Daniel said, "For I have been found innocent is in his sight." I believe that a lot of us in here today, we don't trust God, believe in God, believe that he can do anything in our lives because we don't actually believe that we're innocent in his sight. That you can sit there and say, man, well, he saved Daniel, but did you hear what Daniel did as a response? He prayed, he worshiped, he got down on his knees to serve. But me? I'm not innocent. Innocent would be the opposite of what I do. Innocence would be the opposite of who I am. Do you know what I've done? Do you know what I did 3 hours ago, let alone 3 weeks ago, let alone 3 months ago? Do you know the past that I have? And I just believe that I need to tell you tonight that regardless of your situation, what you've done, the mistakes you've made, that God has found you innocent in his sight. That he has found you innocent in his sight, not by anything that you did, because you and I, we're messed up. We make mistakes. There's things in our lives that we regret, and come on, I have a lot of them. But God sent his one and only son. His name was Jesus. And he lived a perfect life. Perfect life. Yet he was crucified and killed on a cross, which was the way that criminals died. Even though he lived a perfect life. Why? So that God could have a relationship with you and me. He loved you so much that he sent his son to die a criminal's death on a cross. Because why? Because he saw you innocent in his sight. He saw you innocent in his sight. Can we bow our heads all over the room tonight? I believe that there's people in this room tonight that they don't truly believe that you are innocent in his sight. And I just want to tell you that God wants a relationship with you. He doesn't want to just hear from you every now and then. He wants to have a consistent relationship with you, and that starts with you accepting his son, the very Jesus that I just talked about, into your heart to change everything about your world. And if that's you tonight, I'm not going to ask you to do anything crazy. You don't have to stand up, come down to the front, nothing weird. If that's you tonight, you want a relationship with Jesus that's going to change everything. On the count of 3, would you just slip your hand up at me? 1, 2, 3. Come on, all over the room. Praise God. Praise God. Jesus loves you. You can put your hands down. If you raise your hand, I want you to pray this prayer right where you are. Say, God, I love you. And I'm thankful for what you did for me. Sending your son to this earth just so that you could have a relationship with me. So now I confess with my mouth and believe in my heart that you are Lord. Come into my life. Change me forever. God, I pray for all of us in here that we would truly grasp that regardless of if we're in control of the situation, God, that you are ultimately in control of everything going on in our lives. And that we ask that we would trust you in a way that we never have before. That we would believe in you and pray to you after this night in a way that we never have before. God, we love you so much. Amen.